Hi, everybody. Welcome to the conversation. It's live. We're happening. It's all happening. Today, we are doing the Holding Change interview with Prentis. And let's see, let me get myself a little bit more light. Prentis, when you get in here, we are going to go live. Prentis Hemphill is our guest today. And for those of you who are showing up early, what I wanted to ask you, yay! Come on in, Prentis. Come into the room. Hello, my friend. I love you so much.
I love you too. What's up?
What's up, baby?
What's up?
Look at you. It's your great. I love this. I love what's happening over here with the hair. This is fantastic. So let me just talk to our humans real quick. So our last conversation, there was a lot of like bot trolley vibes going on. And I had someone reach out to me who said that if you all, like if you're in the audience and you see that happening, then you can swipe and basically this is spam or this is sexual harassment. That's what was happening last time a lot. So feel free to notice who's human in here and help if that starts to happen. It may not happen, but I just want to say that. I'm not really looking at the chat. So if you're asking questions or saying things in the chat, enjoy it. It's for each other. If you do want to ask a question of Prentis before the end of this is done, you should put it in a little bubble that has a Q in it. And I will go look at the Qs. Depending on how things go, because I have a lot of questions myself, as always, for Prentis. And I get priority. Anyway, so, hey, P.
What's up?
What's up? I just want to tell you, I've been eating your tomatoes.
Are they good or what?
They're really good. They pop in the mouth. They're like this is a tomato that came from a garden.
Yeah.
I guess they probably all come from something like that, but it feels different.
Yeah. Something really similar to that. They all come from places like that. But, you know, Kasha does this thing where she like stresses them out. But it sounds a little like kind of problematic, but I'm going to tell you what she does. Like doesn't water them. Sometimes it stresses them out, but it makes the flavor more concentrated or condensed or something. So
wow, I didn't even know you could stress tomatoes like that.
Maybe there's another word for it.
That's so Virgo. She's like, you know what you're gonna have is a little less. It'll make you better. Trust me, it'll make you better.
Wow.
Yeah, I have so many other questions to ask you, but for today I'm going to focus on this Holding Change. So this is Le Book, and Holding Change is a book about facilitation and mediation. That's what this is. It's really for people who have been thinking about emergent strategy, playing with emergent strategy, and then like, oh, how do I actually practice facilitating spaces with this framework?
Yeah.
And as I was developing the book, it was clear to me that I wanted to put all my co-facilitators and teachers in it because I was like, you all have crucial pieces of this. And Prentis, I think you're like knowing that your piece on boundaries needed to be in here was one of the first things I had very clearly. Like I was like, oh,
nice.
Part maybe 80 to 90% of what's actually happening why we need facilitators is because we don't know how to do boundary work.
That's facts.
Right?
Yeah.
So Prentis's piece is called Boundaries Can Be Love. Boundaries can be love. right there. It's a whole word. You can read the rest of the piece, but that gives you like,
Yeah.
just contend with that. So I'm going to ask you, well, actually, and I'll say that Prentis said this thing, which is boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and myself simultaneously. And it went viral on the internet. Brene Brown was like, oh, that's my friend. And I was like, no, actually, that's my friend. So I'm putting it in my book too. But I feel like that quote has changed people's lives.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like this essay has the capacity to continue that shifting, that changing, to deepen that changing. So before anything else, I just want to say thanks. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for feeling it. Thanks for living into what taught you the lessons of this.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
And then I want to start back with like Prentis as a facilitator, right? Prentis is someone who holds space. When did you become a facilitator? Like, when did you feel like, oh yeah, that's part of what's in my toolbox?
You know, honestly, Adrian, I feel really shy answering that question with you.
Oh.
Because you were someone that I knew of, and then I knew like as a friend and a close person,
Yeah.
but you always so strongly, you've been so clear. I'm a facilitator. You were a facilitator. And I was like, oh, I just be trying shit occasionally. And that's how I relate to this practice. And you were one of the people that made me feel like I could probably get more just clear on what I was doing on my own practice. So I think I became a facilitator. You know, there's levels to it. It's like when I was doing therapy, I felt like like when I did couples therapy, I felt like a certain kind of facilitator. And then when I was developing those skills, people were like, hey, can you come do that for this meeting or this conflict? And a lot of my work has been in the realm of conflict. A lot of my facilitation has been in the realm of conflict. So I'd probably say sometime in this last decade, I've been practicing more and more and more that skill of facilitation. But I feel shy talking to you about it, Adrian.
I can be with your shyness.
Okay.
I can be with it. You know, I feel like people are always like, oh, you're the facilitator. And I'm always like, I think there's so many of us. I do feel like I was like evangelical about it.
Yeah.
I was just sort of like, this is important. And I'm excited about that. I'm like, that's a good legacy. You know, it's just like, we need more people to hold this stuff. So I feel like for many of us, it happens this way. You know, for me, I can think back to Amuta and other people who, like, I was in a room and I saw them and I was like, I want to do what you're doing. Like, I can feel that in me is a capacity to do what you're doing. And so at first I was kind of like trying to do it that way.
Yeah.
And then at some point I started to have my own way. So I wanted to ask you, like, how do you feel like you learned to facilitate? And at what point are you like, this is the Prentis way?
You know, what's funny is like to hear you say you saw other people and go, oh, that's what I want to do. I was the exact opposite, as you might imagine, because we are often that
or
way.
I could do it better. Did you have some of that?
No, I didn't. People were like, come do this. And I was like, why are you asking me to do this?
Oh, that's so Prentis.
That's kind of
like me. I'm trying to go farm.
Exactly. Please don't ask me to do that. But at the same time, when I'm in a room where something is trying to come through or something is trying to happen, when I'm in there, my attention, my awareness, like I just like enter into the space in a way. So that's the part I like, is like, how do I get deep into those spaces? It's all the stuff around it. People are like, can you facilitate? Can you do this? I think that's why I do kind of conflict facilitation, more than any other kind of facilitation, because it's like, all right, we're entering into the intensity. We're trying to see what's happening here. We're trying to stop time. We're trying to like move things around. And this is what I felt in couples therapy too. It's like when you're in with a couple, there's nothing, it's just is. It's all here right now. And you just got to be present for it. So I think that I developed my style. I mean, I think in the middle of like Black movement spaces, in the middle of like stuff that was coming up, it was like, okay, for some reason I have the capacity to create stillness and a lot of chaos sometimes.
Yeah.
And I started to really study that and try to understand what that was made of, what was possible inside of it, that kind of thing.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that's kind of how I don't know, cut my teeth in a way, is being in those movement
Yes.
spaces of high intensity
Yes.
conflict. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also interesting to me that I feel like in most spaces we're facilitating, the conflict is either overt and named and intense, and we are like able to be playing with it, or it's being
Yeah.
repressed with equal intensity.
Yeah,
And,
for sure.
you know, everybody is like, we're good. You know, I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
are you? You know, because I think that conflict is a sign of like different people being together in the same space. That's all it is being
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah.
And people think that that's so terrifying if it shows up. And what I've witnessed in you is always having a sense that like your roots system, like the root system of you was like much deeper down. So like if something was pushing against, you
Yeah.
know, the trunk of your tree, like, you know, some people might be like, oh shit, my trunk fell over. You know,
Yeah.
they pushed me. And you were just like, literally nothing is going to, what's happening? Is there nature?
Somebody's no nature in the form of probably FedEx. I apologize. I didn't anticipate
Oh,
somebody coming down the driveway, but
FedEx doesn't respect IG live scheduling at
oh,
all.
that's a postal worker coming through.
Hi, postal worker. Thank you for your sacrifice.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like there's something that depth in you. It feels almost like a value. So to hear you talk
Yeah.
about stillness and chaos is
Yeah.
a value.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I would ask you maybe to explicitly say that, like, what
Yeah.
are the values that you bring into facilitation, and have they changed over the time that you've been holding others in space? Do you need to like go be with?
No, thank you. Appreciate
Okay.
it. Good to see you.
Sorry, your country life is just so lovely to me.
It is. It is.
Yes.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you.
Okay.
I think the value, it really resonates with me what you're saying about the roots, because in a way, I think that's partly if you're going to do conflict facilitation, I think part of your work is to.
Yes. Yes.
Did you hear
That's
me?
right. I heard you
Okay.
cultivate. Yeah. I was like, I can hear everything you're saying. Do you hear yourself?
No, but it's fine. We have to cultivate that sturdiness. So that has something to do with like how deeply I can let my own system rest. Like it's important for me as a facilitator to have that practice of deepening and being able to go into the deepest parts of myself to understand the things I'm capable of, the things that I'll do. So
Yeah.
I think that's something about a value I have as a facilitator. There's also like, I'm never, how do I say it? As much as I can like keep people's dignity intact, I let what needs to happen in a way.
Yeah.
Like I'm not afraid of emotionality is the other
Yeah.
thing. But it's like, and we're not going to move into a place where we're, you know, even if it's quiet or loud, we're not going to be moving into a place of kind of trying to destroy another person's dignity. But emotionality, I'm like, I can hold that.
Yeah.
I can hold that. And so allowing people their expression, I think is important, and feeling like I can create a body or a place in me that allows and can still listen. I think a lot of times people just really long to be listened to in those moments. And I think, you know, I've heard other folks in this series talk about like, I don't have the answer.
I literally don't have the answer.
You know what I mean? Like, you can come in and you can have your biases, you can have experience of like, oh, I've seen similar things move like this, and maybe there's an appropriate time to offer some insight, perhaps. But
Yeah.
I think you should very much lead with, I I don't have the answer. This group has the answer, and my job is the
Yes.
stirring, the holding,
Yeah.
the encouraging people to take the kind of risks they need to take to say what is their truth.
Yeah,
That's my role, not to say this is what y'all should do or this is what is, because I'm usually not embedded in that system. How would I know other than projection?
that's right. No, I mean, I love that. And it also, to me, like as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about something you taught me about time, which is like we're also reclaiming time and
Yeah.
not in control of time.
Yeah.
And when we're facilitating, a lot of what we're doing is actually the magic of time, like being like,
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
room, there's time for you to feel, there's time for this to move, there's time to shift. And when you taught me that, it changed my practice as a facilitator
Yeah.
because all of a sudden I was like, oh,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, it's totally okay if you have a moment right now. In the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things, like y'all might need to scream at each other right now.
That's
Like
right.
the first time I held people like screaming so much that they had spit flying, you know, and I was just like, I know this is going to be okay.
That's right.
Like, I know this is going to be okay. In the grand scheme of time,
That's right.
mostly this will get forgotten or it will be a moment of change. But like, actually, we're okay if this gets expressed, which is the opposite of how I grew up. I think I grew up like there's never enough time for conflict. You can't even go to bed angry.
Yo.
No, right? And it's like sometimes you're mad and you need to sleep and you need and time will pass and it'll be okay. So
Yeah.
could you speak to the way you value time as a facilitator a
I was
little
just
bit?
getting excited because I'm like, time is one of these, like, I don't want to get too far out into outer space,
Go
but
out there. Let's go.
it's like this, what you're talking about, what time can do. A lot of us are in, a lot of us are healing our relationship to time because of the way
That's
time
right.
has been imposed on our bodies and
That's right.
imposed on our experiences, the way that time has been shaved off of our lives. Someone says it's a Western ass construct. It, to me, it is and it isn't.
Yeah.
To me, it's like, what is my relationship to time? Do I know what time can do? And I think
Yes.
embodiment is like, we talk about slowing down time. When you're able to really feel yourself in your system,
Yeah.
time has a different quality. It moves at a different pace.
Yeah.
And there is a way of relating to time. And I would even say, like, in our bodies, like, we get stuck in moments in time. That's real.
That's so real.
That's not a construct. We get stuck in moments in time. And sometimes when we're in facilitating a room, some people are expressing another moment in time. They're somewhere else.
Literally.
And so part of your facilitation is like, what needs to be tended to here so that you can arrive to this place, that you can arrive to this moment. So
Yes.
I think time is like, I used to say, like, it's one of my goals really in conflict facilitation is for everyone to take one more breath than they were going to, which means that so many other possibilities open up if just one more breath is introduced. If people
Yes.
pause for one more moment to reflect on, oh, where does this originate? What am I trying to say?
Yes.
What does this mean to me? What's the thing I'm afraid to bring to this group? If you just took one more breath that gave you a moment to reframe or shift your internal paradigm, it opens up a whole swath of possibilities we didn't even know were there. So I think time
Yeah.
is real, but the way we inhabit it, the way we play with it, the way we, arrive in it is totally magical in a different way.
It is. I mean, I first of all, what you just said is like the multiverse of time. Like I'm just like, oh, like a breath actually opens up a whole other universe of your life.
That's right.
That's possible.
Right.
And I also think not just time, but there's a way that I think a lot of us get trained or get taught to believe that moving quickly is intelligence.
Come on,
Right?
Adrian.
The faster that we move, the faster that we speak, the faster that we strategize, the faster that we move through things, that's how we're smart. And I feel like it's the opposite. I'm learning the opposite, which is like actually the slower I can move, the more intelligently I can often move, especially if I'm in relationship with other people. The more intelligent we can be in a moment together. And I love this piece around how often are we facilitating something where people are all in different times, and how are we inviting them into the present moment, which I think is a ceremonial endeavor. And so I want to ask you about what are the rituals that you use to facilitate with? Like, what do you do beforehand to get yourself in to the moment that you're trying to then invite others into?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I was kind of pointing to it a little bit earlier that in some ways, because I've kind of taken up conflict facilitation as my work,
Yeah.
in a way, it influences how I live my life and
Yeah.
the depth that I practice getting to,
Yeah.
because there's a reason why I practice this in a way, because I know what it will serve in
Yeah.
us and in our movements. Um, but like on the day of a facilitation, I just had to facilitate something last week, and it's like for me, the day is kind of devoted to it. I may have other things to do, but the day is devoted to it. I
Yes.
sit, I deepen, I also
Yeah.
move. To me, it's like, how am I engaging both a solidity in myself? Because I have to be trustable. That's one of the things that when I move into a space to facilitate, I have to build trust
Yes.
quickly.
Yes.
Like, how do I build trust as quickly as possible in this space is really important for me. So
Yeah.
sturdiness really is helpful for me in doing that. And then how do I move? How do I
Yeah.
have flexibility, movement, flow inside of me so that I don't become stuck or rigid, so that I can move, so I can be open to the course. Oh, this is going somewhere I didn't know it was going. Oh, this is opened up. Instead of
Yeah.
like having a stuckness that is like, no, this is what we said the agenda was going to be. It's like, oh, something is opening up and saying that a pivot is necessary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I dance, I sit, and both of those things help me to be with my energy well, I think, before.
Good.
And sometimes afterwards I cry.
Yeah.
Sometimes I used to just look at my compost a lot when I would facilitate conflicts, and like just be like, everything can
Yes.
transform, transmute. Like, this was food and it's becoming dirt. And, just like getting in touch with that process too is helpful
That's
for
right.
me. Yeah.
That's
Stuff
right.
like that.
Everything has a place.
Yeah.
I feel like I just want to share this with everyone. I feel like one time we finished facilitating and a lot happened, a lot moved. It was hard and it was beautiful. And then afterwards, we were standing in a parking lot by a mountain,
Oh, yes.
playing Beyonce's
Yeah.
Daddy Lessons and just dancing,
Fun.
dancing for the mountain. And, just like, this is also part of the ritual, right? It's just
Yeah.
like so much emotion, however many people you're holding, it's like all the emotion that they're feeling is also
That's right.
pouring towards you, and that releasing it back to the universe is also an important part of the work, right?
That's right.
Um, so you do conflict. And so I want to get into that a little bit. It's like,
A lot.
I think so often people are trying to get facilitators to come and be like, can you help us basically not have conflict? Can you help us like quickly move to the thing that we want to do and like skip the conflict part?
Totally.
And I tried for years to do that. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. So I'd love to ask you to speak about, what do you see the role of difference in conflict? Like, what is the role of conflict in strategizing and moving forward in movement?
It's a great question. What I hope the role can be, what I think the gift of it is, it's an opportunity to get deeply aligned, to understand what we've been practicing, what has been working, what is not, what we did not communicate well, what needed more clear communication. It's an opportunity to have ourselves, our practices reflected back to us.
Yes.
And it is hard because it feels like a tax, and we want to survive, and we're like trained to try to keep ourselves intact. And, this piece around getting good with change, which I know you talk about, I talk about, it's what makes it possible for conflict to be generative. But it is actually, I think we can have moments of just like, we can feel alignment, resonance with someone, and it's like, oh, that feels good, we're on the same page. And then we can also feel that on the other side of rupture and break is like, oh, something was unclear, or we held a different definition of something, or we had different intentions here, or I have to be clear about where these boundaries are to keep the whole intact. So there's always a lesson inside of conflict, and rarely are we able to retrieve it.
Mm.
But there's always a message, and sometimes when we don't retrieve it, it be showing up again. You go to another
Oh
organization,
yeah, I was
same
like, it
luck.
comes right back.
You know what I mean?
Like, you are going to learn this today,
Exactly.
tomorrow, in this lifetime. It will
That's
be
right.
learned.
That's
Yes.
right. So I
Mm.
think it has the key in some ways if
Yeah.
we can be with it with a kind of openness and courage and all of that to transform ourselves or articulate things that are hard. I think it really holds the key.
Yeah.
um yeah, but it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. I mean, I also think it's, you speak about this in the book, that you learned about boundaries from relating to your father. And, I feel like similarly, I learned certain things about conflict from my home, both what was leaned into and what was avoided. And it wasn't taught to me as something that could be a safe thing. Like, you could do it and it would be safe and it'd be okay and you get through it. Um, and I think for me, when I'm like, oh, why did I come into movement without skill in boundaries and skill in conflict? And it's because I grew up in a family, and families, it's not like someone sitting here like, hi, families, you about to have a whole family. Here's how you do
Yeah.
this. And then we go into
Yeah.
movement and the same thing. It's like,
Yeah.
go read books and learn to think about, your big vision and your analysis. But it's like, but how do we be with each other? So
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, like, that's my take on like why we come into movement unable to do conflict and unable to do boundaries. But why do you think it is, what else do you see in terms of why we end up so flailing about and up in each other's faces?
Yeah, I mean, I really align with that. And some of what I've been thinking about is just like I don't want to overuse this word in a way, but it feels accurate. But in a way, the colonization of relationships, like there's such a limitation on what we
Mm.
think is possible in relationship with one another. Um, and we don't, yeah, I think it's like it shows up in our families, it shows up in all the systems that we're in. We're all trying to force everything to behave in a certain way. We're trying to force a kind of perception of who we are, and all of it actually feels really fragile and untrue. And
Yes.
I think we are not as open to I mean, boundaries as like solid as people perceive them is really it's a nuanced practice
That's
of
right.
being aware of our current relationship and choosing ways of relating that we may not have experienced that are specific to this moment in time. And
Yes.
with this person, this is the kind of relationship I want to have. It's not all or nothing. It's
Yeah.
like it's this.
Yes.
These are the contours of it. Um and I think that I think boundaries, the communication of our boundaries, honoring others' boundaries, it gives us it gives us the ability to do the work that we need to do. It like creates a parameter that lets me go, okay, what do I need to shift or do
That's right.
inside of me? What is this bringing up for me? It gives me material and content. And I think we're afraid sometimes that boundaries are just about hurting people. When many of our organizations or projects need really clear boundaries,
That's right.
not as a way of, uh, you know, pushing people out or in, but so that people can make really clear decisions about
Yes.
where they want to be and where they want to
That's
put
right.
their time and where they want to commit. But boundaries help you clarify, this is what this space is, this is what this relationship is. And it may be unique from other spaces and relationships you've been in. But I don't think we have the practice. I don't think we have the examples. And I think we're trying to open up, like, we can choose our relationships and we can choose them
Yeah.
with intention, and we can be clear about what they are.
I love I love the idea that each relationship is actually uniquely negotiated, right? Like,
That's right.
I feel like it's not like, oh, friends, all friends are like this, and my best friend is like
Totally.
this, and my partner is like this, or whatever. But it's like actually each relationship is a negotiated space which is
Right.
also going to be changing sometimes daily. You know,
That's right.
like this is what
That's
the
right.
relationship feels like. And if you're in an organizational space, then you have however many people are there. You know, sometimes the math of it astounds me of like the number of potential
Yeah.
relationships that are also all changing and like landing in the moment,
That's
being like,
right.
who are we now today and how are we now today? What boundaries do we need in this
Yeah.
moment? Right? That's a different way of approaching it. Um, and I think our liberation is actually on the other side of learning these boundaries. Um,
Same.
and I want to say, you know, in our friendship, we had this beautiful moment of recognizing that we occupied space very differently, right? That
Yes.
there was a way that you were like, I start from back here.
Yeah.
And I was like, I start from like here,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
And we physically like navigated, like,
That's
well,
right.
then how do
I
we
remember
find
that.
each other?
Yeah.
And and in my mind though, I was like, you're better at this than me. Like you're just automatically better at this than me. Instead of, I think now my understanding is like, you're introverted at this than me, and I'm more extroverted at
Totally.
this than you.
Yeah.
Um, Even though I'm still a fairly introverted person
Totally.
in my own way, and neither of those are better than, right? Both of those mean we both had things to learn about how to create the boundary, and I feel like for me that was a major learning moment. I was like, oh, we can do that, and just be
Totally.
really honest about how we are and get
Yeah.
there. How did you begin for yourself to learn boundaries, like to learn the work of boundaries, to learn the practice of boundaries?
You know, I wish I could point to a moment. I mean, it's what I wrote
Mm-hmm.
about in the essay. It was a very
Yeah.
visceral experience of kind of getting to the bottom of some pain I had in my own family life and my dynamic with my father. And
Yeah.
um, what I realized, you know, we spent 10 years not talking, and I needed that. And
Yes.
in that, um, after I kind of worked through the pain and all of that, I was like, oh, the way I've been thinking about it was either I cut him out or we go back to having the same relationship that we had before.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that I could choose, and that was actually
That's
part
right.
of the healing process for me, was to choose the frequency, was to choose the depth of, was to choose all of that. The part of me that was like, oh, we're transforming this relationship, that we're healing, was like, you choose now. That's what makes this different. You don't
That's right.
just move back in and then feel the same way you felt when you were 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
You choose now. So it was really in doing deep work around that relationship, and it
Yeah. You
transformed
say
me.
this, I want to read this back to you. You say, the lesson on boundaries was learned both in the distance and in the contact. We don't ever have to change the terms, but I did. And that speaks to another possibility of boundaries. They can change,
Yeah.
which I think is like, that's such a liberating thing. It's like, this is what we're doing all the time.
That's right.
On a grand scheme, we're trying to change the boundaries of how our peoples are interacting with each other
That's right.
and being with each other.
Yeah.
We're trying to change the boundaries of our state, our relationship to the state, our relationship to multiple states.
That's right.
We've been in this, 18-month now process of having vastly different boundaries enforced on us and then still choosing into them. And um, I want to say I'm really grateful for you for the practice that you've done in learning and articulating this. And I want to ask you, if you were to give people like beginning practices for themselves on boundary work, how can people begin to practice boundaries as an act of love?
Hmm. I think uh, right before the practices, I'll just say the mood that I think is necessary is like, these could, how do I say it? You don't have to get it right. You know, I think sometimes when we're like practicing our boundaries, it's like, okay, but what is the right thing that I need to do? And it's like, actually, part of learning your boundaries is just trying. And
Yes.
I think you can try in kind of choosing the proximity you want to have to somebody, choosing the proximity to a friend or a partner. And it's like,
Yes.
oh, actually, maybe I want to try sitting a little bit apart. Maybe we always sit like this on the couch. And it's like, maybe I want to choose to go to another room or read a book or do something I've been longing to. I think the other thing is like, it may not feel good right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
That actually
it doesn't. I love what you said earlier about like, oh, I think boundaries are gonna hurt. And
yeah.
I know whenever I set one, I'm like,
yeah.
and
yeah.
I'm like, oh, are we okay?
yeah. Yeah.
So,
it brings up that anxiety that's like, no, the way that you're doing it is actually keeping you safe.
yes.
And so in order, I think sometimes people imagine, oh, if I practice a boundary here, it's going to feel like, oh, just right.
Yes.
And it might feel like, what are they going to think about me? Maybe they think that I don't like them, or, maybe I should just go be with them, or whatever it might be.
Yes.
Or maybe
That's
we
right.
should,
That's right.
just let whatever behavior go unnoticed or unspoken to. It's like that tension and anxiety will come up. And so knowing that ahead of time, I think, is really important. But you can practice in small places, practice in, if there's something you've been wanting to do that you just haven't chosen to do, choose it one day, and then sit with the anxiety and fear that comes up. Get to know it. Like, what is it afraid of? Afraid that they won't love you, afraid that you won't be needed, whatever it is. But I think it's as simple as that.
I really appreciate that. Like I feel like over the past maybe 5 years, I've started setting so many more boundaries around my time.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I deeply believed if I set a boundary around my time, I would be completely disposed of. That if I said no to even one thing, that people are like, oh, fuck you then. We'll find some other facilitator, we'll find someone else, and we'll never need you again.
That's right.
And it was really intense for me to feel that I was just like, oh, I think I might be disposable. And I have to go examine that. Right? I have to go sit with, where does that come from in me? And it's never been the case, right? Like it has never been the case that like setting the boundary has led to an ending that I didn't want, or has led to a rejection or a pain that I didn't want. It's like, it's led to awkwardness. And then it's almost always led to a more self-realized experience, right? Like a better relationship, a better communication. And I think that's important. So now that this essay is out in the world, because initially you just had the quote and it went all over the world, far and wide. How does it feel to actually have the essay out where you are very vulnerable and you're sharing more?
It's funny because I think when I start sharing my story, like I have the book on my coffee table in there and I read around my piece. I'm like, what else is going on in this book other than what's happening on that page? I don't regret it, but it's like, it is vulnerable. And I actually value that. I think that's a part of this time that I think it's important for us to show our work, show how you got to any particular place, demystify it, and show what your edges are. I'm grateful. I hope that it's useful and it is honest, it's raw, and it goes against some of my like training around what you're supposed to say about your family, what you're not supposed to say about your family. But I think it serves something higher than the shame that my family has. That's important to me. So I hope that it's helpful.
What was your writing process to create this essay?
Well, I remember you asked me, and I think honestly at the moment I didn't register fully that it was going to be situated in the facilitation book till after, and I was like, oh, I hope that was okay.
You said that. You're like, is this going to work? And I was like, it's perfect.
Okay.
So, yeah. But I've had actually a lot of people ask me, they're like, your piece, Malkia's piece, like some of the pieces are more personal, and people are like, is this about facilitation? I'm like, yeah. Read it again.
Yeah. It's a move that I think we have to know how to make. But I think the writing process was like, I was really grateful because at the time, the quote had kind of done its thing, and
Yeah.
I joke a lot. I'm like, man, my headstone is gonna be like boundaries are the distance. That's what it's gonna say. Like I can't escape. Boundaries are the distance.
That's boundaries of the distance. That's
I'm,
you, babe.
nah, I
I
gotta
know
come up
it
with something
happens like
else.
that. It's just like, is this on my forehead? Like,
Right. I gotta put out some other bangers, but
you do all the time. Perfectionism is a commitment to perpetual self-doubt. I'm like,
it's a
like
banger. But you
that's
know,
a banger. I'm
boundaries.
like, I like that you know when you put out a banger too. So
But I felt like I was appreciative of having the opportunity to really say what I meant
yeah,
and what it was about for me and articulate that, because I had a lot of people say like, well, do I have to love and all of that? And I was like, let me put this in context. What I think
yeah,
having this kind of move around boundaries can offer us. And it's an indicator too around like, what are the sensations I'm looking for? Like
yes,
if something is making me hide or diminish a part of myself, um, then my boundary's been crossed.
that's right. That's
So if
right.
I'm perpetually kind of like, you know, diminished in that way, and I think there can be a physicality to it, then my boundary's been crossed, you know?
That's right.
If I'm constantly kind of moving ahead of myself and this urgency you were talking about earlier, then I'm probably crossing my own boundaries. And so
That's
there's
right.
a felt sensation of being able to be intact,
Yeah.
being able to be full inside of yourself, having enough room to love yourself, to feel
Yeah.
love for yourself. To me, those are indicators of, oh, my boundaries are in their proper location.
I love that.
You know?
I love that. And it speaks to, there's some questions that have come up that people have put in here. And I want to come over to them now. And one of the first ones feels related to this because what you're talking about is like, can you feel yourself? And there's a lot of ways we have to remember how to feel ourselves. So
Yeah.
I think as children, everything is feeling. It's like, I don't like this feeling. I'm crying. Now I like this feeling. And I'm not, it's like I feel and I'm in the moment. And then as adults, we unlearn how to feel and we have to remember.
Yeah.
And so there's a question here, Prentis, how did you find somatics? It seems so inaccessible to the public and yet vital.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I found it, I mean, what I often say too is that there are moments in my life and probably your life too, where you didn't register, like, you know, I grew up in a church, in Black Southern church, and the way that bodies moved or expressed or released, like, that was always a part of my frame on what was possible.
Yeah. Oh, wait, hold on just a second. You're doing a little. Let's see. Sorry. Yeah, I'm trying to see if you're back yet.
Oh, weird.
There's a little circle going. Oh, but you sound good. Okay, now I hear you again.
But you can't see me?
Um, I can see you. And just as a reminder, if you want to ask a question, put it where the Q is in that little comment, because the chat is going too fast to track it. All right, so you were saying.
What was I saying? What was the question? I got lost.
The question was about somatics and how it's like not
it.
accessible but vital.
Got it. Yeah. I was saying that I usually answer this question that before we talk about the canon of somatics or the like scholarship of somatics, I learned about the body and expression and connection through culture, through growing up the way that I did, through, I grew up in the Black Southern church tradition, and there was so much expression and expulsion and all of that through the body. So in a way I didn't have a word for it, but it was part of my practice, and I used dance for myself to express and to release. And I came to somatics kind of accidentally. I worked for Malkia Cyril back in the day. and they brought somatics into the organization, and I started
Mm-hmm.
practicing there. And then I think I worked at Generation 5 and did deeper work, but it was like, it was aligning with other healing work I was doing. I was doing a lot of meditation and sitting at the time, and kind of came to it through work, to be honest. And I was like, oh, this brings a lot of the pieces together for me. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a couple of the things you've been doing, I feel like there's been a shifting. Like, if people are like, oh, I want to access some somatics, Prentis has a series called Street Somatics that you've been doing on Instagram, where there's some options here for folks to, just do the basic centering practice, which that's the thing I tell people all the time is I'm like, get a centering practice. Like it might be this centering practice. It might be something else that is your grounding, your centering practice, but really land in the centering practice. And it almost opens the door for everything else, like
Yes.
whatever it is that can invite you into your body,
Yes.
start there and move outward. So I think that's super important. And there's more questions here. Someone says, is this video available afterwards? Yes. All of the videos are on my Instagram live or IGTV, I think they call it. And it's the Holding Change series. So here's a question. What about when feeling or being yourself seemingly transgresses on a loved one's boundaries? Like you want to ask meaningful questions and engage in meaningful conflict, but it feels unsafe to this loved one.
I'm curious your thoughts here too, Adrienne, but what about when being yourself transgresses on another's boundaries? I mean, I think there's a lot of things that would be specific to your context and who you are and who they are. But I guess what the answer probably is never, is that that element of your relationship should continue in that way. So it may be that there's, I think if someone's saying what you're doing is crossing my boundary, then that is information that either your needs aren't getting met in this relationship, or there's something that you're doing that may need some reflection on your end to understand what is motivating that. Because I think if we are taking actions that are impacting other folks in these ways, we are probably not getting satisfied through that action.
That's right.
Either. So if what you're trying to do is get to know them more, like what's your intention underneath? If what you're trying to do is get to know more about them, there may actually be a more effective strategy for doing that. But whether or not you are invested in that, or whether or not this feels like a fulfilling relationship for you, I think are some of the other things to consider. But I think that would be my answer.
Yeah, I think for me, I think I have slowly moved away from being in relationship with people who feel transgressed upon by being my whole self. Like, I feel like I'm in relationships with people now where I can say, maybe this isn't the right time for that, or that, I need the energy. Like, we just had this funny moment. The NBA finals just happened.
Yes.
And, Nalo was like, so my beloved was like, yes, I'm so into this. And I was like, you being your full self for this is amazing. And my full self is going to go lay down, because this is like, right. And to me, I'm like, that's the beauty of the relationship, is that we both get to be our full selves and keep learning how to do that. I think that's the thing for me. And I also, I very much know that I'm privileged in terms of how I work, that I don't really work with people either, that I'm like, if I can't be my whole self, I'm like, then we should work together. And I will leave a work really, I'll be like, oh, this isn't going to work for us. This isn't going to work because, me being here, you being here isn't working. Right.
Yeah.
So I think there is something about letting that inform the relationships that you choose to be in.
That's right.
Yeah. I love this question. Does the practice of boundaries become easier to the point that it just is how you move in the world?
I don't think I'm the final boss on boundaries yet. Like, I don't think that I'm like, I've defeated the game or something. But I do feel like, from my experience, they are significantly easier
Yes.
for me than they
Yeah.
used to be. And in part, it's like, as I feel for it, I'm like, there's a place that's opened up in me where other people's disappointment can kind of go and be transformed.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
and it isn't like so big that I'm reactive to it anymore
Right.
in the same way. And there's a part in me that feels it's feeling more and more like what I'm here to do in my work and my commitments and my well-being are important enough or central enough or have enough of me behind them that it's making it clear how to do the clearing away process, because it's like
That's
it's not just about how can I hold these boundaries, but like what are you what is it making possible for your life? What do you
that's right.
care about? Where's your love at? And how does your boundaries make more of that possible? It's not just about, for me, it's not just about protection. It's about
That's right.
making room for the other stuff to come through. And so I'm feeling more and more like the other stuff is just has a kind of force that it's putting things in their proper perspective. That's what I feel.
That's right. I think that's right. I feel similarly that I kind of get blown away by now it just feels like, oh, I didn't before I thought boundaries was like you said, it was a wall or something I have to like,
Yeah,
and now I'm just sort of like, oh, like this is just something that I have to attend to. This is
that's
just
right.
something that's like in every relationship there are boundaries to negotiate,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, let's see what else is here. Okay, here's a question. What recommendation do y'all have for supporting young people who have been thrown away and feel that fear of being disposable when practicing boundaries?
What came to me was have them practice with you. If you are
Yeah,
a trustworthy body to them, if you are a place, yeah,
yeah,
of trust, if they trust you enough to express that, to reveal that they are afraid or whatever it might be, then have them practice with you and
that's right.
have them see that you can still love them even as they express their own parameters. So I think that's one suggestion. Yeah.
I love that. And I actually think that's a way that anyone can learn boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like it does, like I think people are like, oh, I need to go to workshop and do all this stuff. It's like, no, like who do you love?
That's right.
What are your boundaries with them?
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right.
are you going to work? Do you feel like going to work? You know, we've been doing this for the Emergent Strategy Ideation Institute. The pandemic has been a real thing where we've had to practice boundaries with each other almost daily because things have been changing so rapidly. And even being able to say, like, yeah, I can come to the meeting.
Yeah.
I'm like, can I come or not? How would I be able to be there?
Yeah.
Recognizing sometimes I'll get into a space or get into a meeting and be like, I actually can't be here right now. I don't have the capacity, and I don't even necessarily know that I can explain why I don't. Like that is a boundary. I used to think I owed everyone an explanation for my no,
That's right.
and you know that no is a complete sentence is real. Like I'm like, no, I cannot do it right now. If I care about you, maybe I'll circle back and tell you why later.
Totally.
But really being able to say that young people, whatever age people are, they deserve the space to practice,
That's
right?
right. It makes me think, I just want to say like one of the things that's been with me is like boundaries are about our interrelationship. Like
Yeah,
they exist because we impact each other, because we are connected, because of that. That's why we have to have boundaries and moments as a kind of expression of that. And what I think allows our like friendships or love relationships to deepen is
yeah,
actually the expression of our boundaries, because it's like, this is who I am right now. And you know,
That's
I
right.
think some of our relationships can get static or stagnant when we aren't able to receive or express our boundaries. I think when we do that, it keeps actually the love practice alive
That's
in a
right.
different way.
Well, and I love that too, because there's another question about the intergenerational, like how do you do boundaries? And I think about this where I used to treat my parents and my grandparents like such fragile beings. Like you
Mm,
cannot handle my boundaries, like particularly,
yep.
even though I'm like, you're the ones who cross my boundaries a lot of times. And there's something about recognizing like the humanity. It's like generations shift things. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And so coming back to people, I've had really powerful moments with my parents and my grandparents of being like, here's who I actually am, and here's the boundary I actually need. And then that's the learning moment. And I think
Yes.
that's true in our intergenerational movement work too. That,
Yes.
I think older generations had really different boundaries around the personal and the political space.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like a period of saying the personal is the political, like we're
Mm-hmm.
collapsing those things. But I still feel some of the, I have talked to elders who are like, why do we have all these activists out here twerking and doing all their butts on the TVs and stuff? And I'm like, oh yeah, like you're actually talking about what I understand to be a boundary, like that happens in your personal space. And this,
That's right.
and I was like, there's a generation now that is like now actually claiming the space for our bodies
Yeah.
is a new boundary, is a new
That's right.
assertion, right? We're pushing back a certain boundary or a certain containment on us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm. There's a lot to say that. Mm-hmm.
Let's just do one or two more questions. There's a lot here, I just want to say, and they're like real questions, but let's just do a couple more of these. Can you give some examples of setting boundaries in workspaces? Like what that could look like?
Yeah. Well, um, I think I'll have to think of some examples that are not. I think I work in a particular way too.
Yeah.
And I've really had to set boundaries around my time, and a lot of that I've had to. It's about me. It's
That's
not
right.
just setting external boundaries. It's about acknowledging my boundaries and practicing those, and I'm the practice partner. And
Yes.
not even I'm the practice partner, my fearful self. I'm practicing with my most fearful self. That part you were talking about earlier, you know, what
Yeah.
I will disappear if I don't respond to everything. Like I won't be able to practice or do. So I've had to set a lot of boundaries for me around, there's requests that come in, and then there's what's aligned. There's
That's
people's
right.
needs that are very real, and then there's what's aligned with my capacity and my commitment and vision.
That's right.
And I think that is just a really important move for all of us, I think, to make. And then, boundaries in terms of workspace too. I think that I'm gonna let you go. You go, and then I'm gonna marinate on it because I'm close to something, but it's not quite there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot around time. So, like, one of the first boundaries that I ever thought about in practice when I was an executive director was that everyone had the right to a boundary when they were not at work. So, it's like when you leave here, like 5 o'clock, you're no longer expected to respond to a communication from me until your work time starts again tomorrow or whatever.
Yeah.
And like, it was a simple boundary and it really helped people. It really helped me to be able to be like, oh, right, I'm not on all the time. I'm not expected. I'm not in a, I think
Yeah.
I said it at the time, but it was like, I'm not an emergency room doctor on
That
call. And
that
that's the way I was working. Like, I was working like everything is a constant life altering crisis. And it was just like, that's not the work I signed up for. I signed up for long-term systemic change work.
Yeah.
So I needed boundaries that I acknowledged that. I had boundaries around because I was working with people that I was also friends with. Are we in a work conversation or not in a work conversation? That felt like a really important boundary in the workspace. Having boundaries around, we set a lot of boundaries around talking shit about other organizations.
Yeah.
So we had like a sort of cap on them where it's like, you can take a moment to talk about a critique, but in the organizations that I'm in, we don't talk shit about other people's
That's so good.
way of doing. It's just like they're just doing it their way.
Yes.
Right. Oak trees don't talk shit about mushrooms. It's not necessary. Right. We're all doing different things. So those are some
That's
practice
great.
boundaries that we got into.
That's great.
Sorry, I'm just watching Nalo like
there's a lot going on
there
in
with
the
the
chat.
boundary sword, just like. Anyway, I love this. So.
Bots be gone. All right.
It's just the bots and the boundaries like moment. The thing is,
it's
just,
real intense. It's so intense.
I know, like there might be an end to being able to do this shit on Instagram Live because I'm like, you are owned by Facebook, and it feels like it.
Right.
Any other thoughts on that one? Because there's a couple more questions here.
Let's do the other question just so we can get more in.
Great. So Lydia, our friend, said, can you speak to how you adapted when a boundary backfired in some way? Like, how did you deal?
Oh, I wonder what backfired means. What do you think backfired means?
Well, I know that I've definitely set a boundary, like some of my work boundaries where I'm like, I'm not available basically ever. And then,
yeah.
And then had someone reach out to me like, but I was trying to like really give you something that you needed.
Oh, totally. Totally.
And I was like, oh, I think I went too hard with that boundary and needed to soften. Like for me, I tend to go like rigid and then soften. When I need a boundary, like I'm like, now we're not talking. And then I soften back into like, oh, wait a second. Like maybe we can talk sometime. But I don't know if that brings anything to mind for you.
I mean, I think about like backfiring. I think the way, how do I handle that? I'm like, well, it depends on the impact. I might apologize and be like, I'm sorry, I was on one because I'm trying to figure out that sweet spot in this domain. And like you said, I went real hard in the paint because I was like, I used to talk about I had a Dragon Ball Z no, where I say no, like, no, with that kind of force. How dare you ask me for anything?
That's right.
And I was like, oh shit, maybe I could like not do all that because I'm expending all my energy in this no. When actually my energy is serving the bigger thing. The other thing, the commitment, and I'm giving away all my energy in this no. How dare you? Didn't they know? Whatever. And it's like I have to come back and be like, I am actually learning how to be with the things that I want to be with. I'm learning how to negotiate this. I'm sorry, I'll be tripping. Like there are ways that we can. I guess what I want to say in that is like, this is not something to get perfect.
That's right.
They're gonna backfire. That don't mean it's not worth practicing.
That's right.
It means this is the process of learning who you are right now. So you're gonna regret a boundary. You're gonna, want to change it up. Like you're not. I think that's where we get nervous about practicing because it's like, I gotta say it right, do it right. You just gotta get in there and you'll learn. That's
right. Well, and I have to say, this is one of those things where I think of Octavia, all that you touch, you change, and all that you change changes you.
Yeah.
And I definitely tend to be like one-sided in my imagination of how the boundary is going to go. Like, I'm just like, I set my boundary.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, wait, but the other person is also alive.
Yes.
And they have boundaries, they have needs, and they're going to come back. And sometimes, sometimes I think I set a boundary really clearly. That's my fave. And then someone comes back in a way that I'm like, oh, I was not clear, because the way that person responded lets me know either I wasn't clear or they can't honor the boundary.
Yes.
Which is it? What, and I love this idea that it's like the thing that makes people uncomfortable is there's no perfection, and it's not a done and done, one and done thing.
Yes.
It's a way of being, right? Boundaries are an act of love because you're loving yourself all the time.
That's right.
You're like, oh,
that's right.
I'm learning all the time what I need to do.
Yeah, because we're like moving our way through this life, and we have this energy to manage. We have this like self-expression and realization. We're like always trying to move towards something. Now, I think our boundaries can,
Yeah.
So it ends up, sometimes you're perpetually putting up things, and then you need some feedback, like you were saying, like there's actually an
Yeah.
opportunity, or there's more for you, and
Yeah.
you are putting up these walls that are actually not related to what's happening right now. They are
Yeah.
just walls around contact, or walls
That's
around what's scary, or walls around, you know, your leadership or whatever. You can put up these
yeah.
walls that limit your own feeling. And I think
Yeah.
boundaries actually create the opportunity for us to feel more, or, you know, express ourselves. And so I think that's also something to be looking for in our practice.
I love that. And I also love like this idea that sometimes you set the boundary, you know, like I remember having this moment of like everyone in movement is just being unprincipled in conflict and just going really hard with like boundaries that presumed that to be true.
Yeah.
And then it didn't allow for the fact that like actually there's a lot of people who are trying to practice really principled conflict.
Yeah.
And if I can't see that that's also happening, then because my boundary is so high and so strong, I've fortified myself into an isolated space where I can't even be hopeful about the possibility of movement because I can't see
Yes.
all the things that are happening that are not as loud as
Yeah.
that unprincipled behavior.
That's right.
And I feel like there's stuff like that where it's like, oh, hold up. Like, you know, for me, I used to have such a hard line. Like, no one can, don't call me out of the blue. Like, just don't call me. Don't ever drop by my house. You're like me. And now I'm like, I would actually rather get a phone call from someone in movement that I know and love who needs even just 15 minutes of like thinking together about how to be principled in conflict than someone paying me, you know, $1,000 to come be present with them within the rigid boundaries that I had set.
Yeah.
For something that was actually unprincipled, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's like those kind of things where I'm like, oh, I actually want to be available to the things I think are working.
That's right.
There's a really sweet thing here. How do you manage the disappointment?
Manage it.
Right? Manage the disappointment, right? Because I'm like, that's definitely happening. Like you set a boundary with someone and they're disappointed. And sometimes maybe you're even disappointed because you can't have it some other way. How do you manage that?
I think one major skill is to let it be.
Yeah.
And see if you can tolerate someone being disappointed in you. And I think there's something that really grows you in that, like, you're disappointed, and I'm gonna let you have the autonomy to have your feelings. Like I think the managing can be challenging for us because it's like that's actually what keeps our boundaries out of whack. Is sometimes we're trying to manage other people's experiences and other people's emotions, and then when we set a boundary, the emotion we've been kind of safeguarding against, which is disappointment in us, is suddenly there.
Yes.
But that's the opportunity for someone else to self-reflect. Like, is this disappointment about this? Have I been asking too much? Or what's the impact I've had? It gives them an opportunity to actually sit with what you all have been in agreement to avoid.
That's right.
So let it be, and let yourself be with the anxiety of, I'm disappointed and I'm afraid that I won't belong or I won't be loved or whatever it is. Whatever I'm gonna just say it plain like this, whatever the lie is that is animating you crossing your own boundaries, you've got to sit with that at some point.
Ah, that's a banger. A of all, that's a banger. B of all, I really love connecting it back to freedom because I think that's the piece that people don't realize is that the boundaries are an act of liberation for yourself and for the other person. That you're saying you are free to feel the full range of your emotion, and I am free to feel the full range of my emotion. To actually negotiate the space in between. And we may not be compatible in our full range as free beings. And that shit's okay because we're free to go. Okay. But we are also free to like love each other as actual people. And that's where boundaries are like so exciting to me. That's where it's like it all comes alive because we're like we get to be free.
That's the thing. It's like, it's conflict avoidance in a way at its root, because it's like,
Yes.
I'm avoiding this feeling, but you're also avoiding because you've attached the possibility of your own freedom, you know, to this thing that you're avoiding. And it's like, if I can, come on, wade in the water, if I can go into the discomfort, on the other side of that is a certain kind of liberation that I have not allowed myself to feel. I've actually not allowed myself to be loved as I am.
Oh, that's right. And you know, you asked me this before. You've asked me this question before. It's like, do you know how lovable you are? Right. And I think that's also like when you're coaching someone into a boundary.
Yes.
A lot of it is that question, right? It's like, do you know how precious you are?
Period.
Do you know how lovable you are? Do you know how valuable your time is? Do you know how you don't owe anyone else this miraculous time? Period. Do you understand all of that? Like, a boundary is actually so much easier to do from that place of like, I am a sacred divine being that is miraculous and only going to be here one time. So no, I can't waste any of this, you know.
That's right.
Like, it's a different framework, right? It starts to become a really big yes at the center of it.
That's right.
And I want to say, I see you living in your yes, right? Like, the Embodiment Institute is such a yes. The baby that's coming is such a yes. You on the farm is such a yes.
Thank you.
The way you are speaking and writing and dreaming into Black people's lives and humanity's futures is a yes.
Yo.
And all of that yes is available because of the boundaries you set.
Come on. Come on. And
I teach you.
I want to say I received that, and I love you, friend, for saying that and reflecting that back. And I just want to say for Black people,
yeah,
when we are able to feel and express our boundaries.
Yes.
Okay, wait a minute. I gotta sit up for this.
You guys, hold up. I gotta like get
I
my
gotta sit up for
right
this real fast.
I gotta get this together.
What I want to say is that part of what we are embedded in,
yes,
social relations, this experience of oppression, this historical pressure and weight that we are living under, it has in it allowances, what you are allowed to have boundaries around, what you are not allowed to have boundaries around, what you're allowed to feel, what you're allowed to dream, what you're allowed to do, make, create. And I'm saying that when we are able, not even when we're able, not even gonna put it like that.
When we claim it, baby.
Come on.
We claim this shit that is already ours.
Yes. When we practice our boundaries, it changes. It alchemizes something. It changes actually the social relations that are possible in this world. And so that actually is a part of the deep transformation that we are having to do. I got to change my boundaries.
That's right.
Because I have been taught that my boundaries have to be in these places and not in these places.
That's right.
Because I've taught I can be this, I can live inside of this range because I'm recreating this reality over and over again. But when we start upsetting this and we start expressing our boundaries, like we were talking about earlier, it opens up possibilities for relationships, for futures, all of this stuff. So the practice of our boundaries, the practice of this liberation, it rewrites the future.
It rewrites the future, and it also rewrites the present, and it also, I feel like it reverberates all the way back, right? Like what you're really unlocking, what we're really unlocking is like the cage was the lie.
Come on.
The limitation was the lie. The whip was the lie. The punishment was the lie. All of that was the lie. And if we're going to course correct for our species, right, then we have to live in the truth. And the truth is uncomfortable and disappointing. There's grief, there's loss, but there's freedom, right? And the freedom is worth all of that. It's worth all of it. It's worth all of it. Woo! It always has been. It always will be. And I tell people this all the time. You know, I watch you. It makes me more free. And I have people reach out to me and they're like, I see you, and that makes me more free. And what I think we are responsible for is having our boundaries out loud, being free out loud, so that we create this echo chamber that goes beyond anything we can imagine. Come on. Right? That's the Buddha talks about that. We cannot even imagine anymore a cage. Right? Like the cage becomes impossible to imagine. Like I talk to people sometimes and they're like, oh, I can never say that at work. And I'm like, I can't imagine that. Oof. I can't imagine being in a condition where I could not say that I can't be on this phone call right now because I don't feel good
Oof.
or I'm on a period or whatever is happening. I can't imagine that now for my life. I don't want anyone else to imagine that because the cage is the lie.
Come on,
Right?
Adrian.
The repression of, I mean, but you know what I'm saying?
Uh,
I know you know what I'm saying
do I
because
know
you
what
taught
you're
me what I'm
saying?
saying.
Do I know what
You
you're
know,
saying?
and I feel like that's the thing is like I'm like boundaries not only can be an act of love,
Come
but I really
on.
feel like the assertion of boundaries are an act of liberation.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Oh,
Let me,
oof.
I just got excited, Adrian. I feel
I'm
like
so excited. I feel
I'm
like
so
my whole tail is
excited.
wagging of my soul or something, like my soul tail,
Because
whatever that
I
is.
just feel like part of what you just said and opened up for me, it's like the clarifying of how much violence the lie takes.
That's right.
And got
It
us out
takes so
here
much.
scared of these boundaries that we need to have.
That's right.
But the lie takes a whole lot of violence, and we're scared of these boundaries, and we're scared to be learners, and we're scared to practice, and we're scared to fail, and all of these things. But when we start to get into that, when we start to let ourselves be a little wilder and a little freer, a little more open,
Yes.
that stuff don't even make sense. Because if it's true, why does it take all that?
That's right. And the power that then becomes unlocked. Like there's something about, you know, I said this to you, I've known you for a long time now.
Yes.
And when I think about the you that I first met versus the you now, I'm like, there's a through line, right? There's always you. But the power that you have now, having set the boundaries around your life, is outstanding and outrageous. Like I feel like, oh, like you could, I truly believe you could do anything. I truly believe you could like point at something and just be like, boom, you know, like now that is done or whatever. Like that's what it feels like to be in your presence. And I see that in the people that I think of as the most liberated people is that their boundaries are so clear. They're like, I'm not on earth to do everything for everybody. And I'm not on earth to be likable. And I'm not on earth to please everyone. I'm on earth to serve some massive channeled power, this thing that I have to deliver. And it might be boundaries are the distance, right? And it might be perfection is, right, the commitment. But whatever those things are that can only come through you cannot be heard if you're trying to uphold all this lie, you know? It not only takes a lot of violence, but it takes a lot of time. Back to that time piece. It takes so much time to live your life for other people. And there really is enough time if you live your life for yourself.
It wastes
people,
so much
your
time.
People.
It wastes. That's how you waste time. That's how you waste time. People think they're wasting time by sitting down and, you know, feeling the breeze. No, how you waste time is being embodied in somebody else's commitment for your life. That's how you waste.
I just felt like, the ancestors are pleased with that, baby. That was another banger. That was a banger, Prentis. All right.
Yeah.
I don't even know where we are in the time-space continuum, but I feel a sense of completion, like ecstatic completion,
I
right? That we're like, okay. I actually feel like I want to sit down now and journal. Just be like, hold on. I think we just unlocked another level.
Yes.
And that's good. That's good news. So
I love you. Thank you.
I love you. A final thing I want to ask you is maybe a two-part. Is there anything in terms of how you want people to use this essay, moving out into the world, moving forward?
Oh, wow.
Like seed planting, you know?
Yeah, I think it's like, you know, boundaries can be love. I think the practice originates in love. And so I hope that it's like when you begin your practice of loving yourself, of honoring your path, of illuminating and clearing the way for your purpose, that love practice, let this be the tool or the lesson that follows that sensation that you activate in your own system of love is possible for me. I'm lovable beyond measure. And that this is the way that that love gets practiced in relationship. So I hope that it can be used that way.
Yes, I hope so. I feel like crying a little bit. That's so beautiful. I want that for people so much.
Me too.
And then are there other things that you're doing that you want to let people know about? Like they're like, oh, now I understand that I need Prentis in my life. How does that happen?
Yeah, for sure. It can happen in a couple ways. We can hang out some more. We can hang out through the Embodiment Institute, which is an organization that I founded where we are doing embodied practice and exploration and healing together. So you can check us
Yes.
out. We're on Instagram. We have a website, the Embodiment Institute. And then I have a podcast called Finding Our Way that Adrian, I think, was maybe the second guest on that podcast.
Yes.
And it is a great exploration of like I think Alexis Pauline Gumps, who was in this chat, who was
I saw Alexis in here
come
too.
on.
We can't do it without Alexis.
Alexis,
it's not going to work without Alexis. So
Alexis has called it a gathering of the compasses, folks that are pointing us in some of the directions we might need to go. We are having our week of sessions next week where folks who are on this season are sharing a little bit of their brilliance. So you can go to our Finding Our Way Instagram and get more information about how you can get involved with the session. So that's and thank wonderful. You. Appreciate you.
Thank you. I love you so much. I appreciate you so much. I learn every time.
Same.
I learn every time. Actually, it's an affirmation of my boundaries, you know, that I'm like, there's so many things that I say no to, and then I have enough time to sit with you. I'm like, what a good affirmation. Same. I made a good decision there. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to everyone who helped clear out the comments section. Thank you for everyone who created and held boundaries in this space with us. Thank you, Nala. Thank you, everybody. We love y'all. This will go on the live thing. It'll go on IGTV. And our next guest is going to be Zuri, who created all the assessments in the book and is brilliant at thinking about research and questions and how we assess and understand where we are in relationship to emergent strategy, in relationship to our facilitation skills. So that's going to be on Monday. We'll be on here, I think, at noon. So I'll post a little flyer about it. But tell your friends to come. They can come and access this brilliance that just came through today. Like, everyone should know about it.
Yeah.
I love you so much.
I love you too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.